Hello and welcome to Katmai National Park. We're at beautiful Brooks Camp. My name is Mary. I'm a volunteer here and we are here for Ask a Ranger. And today we have Ranger Becca is going to answer some of the questions that you people have sent in. And you're not the only ones who ask them. We get people here at camp ask them all the time too.
Yeah.
So our first question today, Becca, is what animals eat discarded salmon?
Yeah, so it's maybe something that you are able to observe if you're watching the webcam, all those eat salmon at all the different stages of their life cycle. And there are some animals that will prey on salmon. So they'll fish for the salmon, kill the salmon, and take it out of the water. Like bears will do that. You've probably been seeing that happening up by the falls and yeah, down here by the bridge as well. But then there are other animals that will feed on the salmon that's left over after a bear might high grade. That's what it's called when a bear starts to get full enough that it can select just the choicest parts of the salmon. So maybe the skin or the head, possibly the roe. And these opportunistic eaters that come in to pick these things up, we can see them on the webcam and hear them too. Those are creatures like glaucous-winged gulls. We can see black-billed magpies taking advantage of those carcasses, and bald eagles as well. And I understand, Mary, that you actually have an anecdote about something that you saw between some glaucous-winged gulls.
Well, I was pretty surprised because there's all this salmon laying just all over the ground. And I see a gull, a glaucous-winged gull, come and take a piece of the salmon. And then another glaucous-winged gull comes over and tries to steal it from him. And I'm thinking, all the salmon laying around, you have to take the one the other guy took.
Right.
And it just kind of reminded me of my children when they were young. That's mine. No, that's my piece.
Right.
So anyway, I just thought it was interesting.
Indeed. Well, in glaucous-winged gulls, they can be pretty aggressive towards the other birds, including other glaucous-winged gulls. So maybe not unusual to see fights like that. But
when it's so plentiful, why fight?
Right, indeed, indeed. There are other bears that will also take advantage of carcasses that perhaps more dominant bears have fished and partly eaten. So last year, for example, I saw bear number 151 kind of sneak up behind where 856 was fishing in the jacuzzi. And 856, you know, he might take a salmon over towards the island that's just downriver of the falls. Maybe do some high grading, you know, strip the skin, eat the head, and then go back to the jacuzzi. So 151 kind of snuck up along the island and then just grabbed the carcass that was left over.
Clever.
Yeah, so there are some less dominant bears who will also eat the discarded salmon. And ones that live around here that maybe we could see eating discarded salmon bodies include coyotes, lynx, river otter, we might see ravens, you know, perhaps shrews if they're around. And there's also a whole host of teeny tiny little organisms, so macroinvertebrates and microinvertebrates that would also take advantage of being able to eat some discarded salmon bodies.
I do recall seeing a lot of flies on the dead salmon that were laying underneath the platform.
Right, yeah, I hear that caddis flies will colonize salmon bodies. So they could be rich with flies.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I like the image of that one.
Well, you know, good for the flies. So,
that's right.
Yeah.
Now, tell me, there's another element that also benefits from the salmon, and it's not exactly an animal. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So there are animals, of course, that will take the salmon out of the river, and some of these scavenging animals, whether it's bears or birds or any other type of mammal, might bring salmon carcasses farther into the forest in order to enjoy some cover while they're eating. And that the marine-derived nitrogen that can be found in salmon bodies might end up in the soil, and then the trees that grow there will absorb that nitrogen. So there's essentially salmon DNA in the forest that's around the Brooks River. So, yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
Right.
Absolutely amazing.
In essence, yeah, the trees are eating discarded salmon bodies in their own way.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, we ready to move on?
Let's, yeah.
All right. The next question is, how can you tell a wolf from a coyote? And does Katmai have both?
Right.
Now, before you do that, I have a suggestion.
Okay.
Okay, you can tell a wolf because a wolf will go, ooh. And a coyote will be, yip, 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 yip.
That is maybe one way,
Okay.
right?
Are there other ways?
There are, right. So if you can't hear the wolf or a coyote, for example, if you're looking at it, wolves' ears are shorter and a bit rounder than coyotes, and their muzzles are also shorter and sort of blockier. So that would be the features of a wolf. A coyote is on average smaller, so maybe like the size of a collie, and its ears are taller and pointier. Its muzzle will also be longer and pointier. So those are some of the things that you can check for if you're trying to figure out whether it's a wolf or a coyote. Since Katmai has both, you know, there was a documented case of a coyote just a couple miles from Brooks Falls. There was a photo taken last year, so we know for sure they're around.
Wow.
And I did hear reports of wolves being up by Brooks Falls within the past week or so. We have more wolves, or it's more common to see wolves at the Brooks River than it is coyotes. So if you happen to be watching the Falls cam and you see a large canine, there's a good chance that it is a wolf, but you can use these things to look for relative size, the size and shape of the ears, and the size and shape of the muzzle.
I did see a wolf the other day going down the road, and my personal observation from a distance was the legs were really long. And when I saw it, my first thought was it was a baby moose.
Yeah.
Because the legs were just so long. Then we got closer and I realized it was not a baby moose.
Indeed.
It was a wolf. So I don't know if that's statistically proven, but their legs look much longer to me.
Indeed, yeah. And that might be something if you see a creature and you think it's a young moose, but it turns out to look more like a dog, then right, maybe you're on track that you're seeing a wolf.
Okay. Our next one is a question that somebody just asked me this on the platform the other day. Why and how was the fish ladder dismantled? Shouldn't we help the salmon?
Right.
But before we get to that question, for those who don't know, could you please explain to us what a fish ladder is? Because my image of fish climbing a ladder is probably not what the fish ladder is.
Right. Difficult to climb a human-like ladder if you're a salmon and just have fins. Indeed, a fish ladder, we have one, or we had one, just to the side of Brooks Falls. So as you're looking upriver, it's on the left. It's closer to the falls platform. A fish ladder is like an artificial waterway that's constructed in order to aid the upriver migration of fish like salmon. And so this particular fish ladder, you know, you can sort of envision like a series of steps kind of cut into the ground around the falls that would have had water flowing over it. And so it made it more of a gradual journey upriver for salmon rather than needing to jump the falls itself, that 6-foot high waterfall. Instead, they could go for a series of smaller steps to perhaps have an easier time getting upriver.
Like instead of doing the hurdles versus the high jump.
Right, yeah, that might be a good way to say it. I like that. That's right, and the fish ladder that's next to Brooks Falls, it was constructed in between 1949 and 1950 by the Bureau of Fisheries, which, oh, there's a float plane coming in, so I might just wait for a moment. We could enjoy the lovely view of the float plane with a bear. Looks like eating some fish in front of it. Lovely.
I think we're good.
All right. So yeah, the fish ladder that's up at Brooks Falls was constructed between 1949 and 1950 by the Bureau of Fisheries. They had a fish lab up by Lake Brooks, where the Brooks River begins. And they built it hoping that it would aid the upriver migration of sockeye salmon, because they saw reduced numbers of salmon coming into the Brooks River and coming through Bristol Bay as a result of overfishing during World War II.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the overall population of salmon in the region had decreased. And so this was one effort to try to help bring those numbers back to fishing. And so, you know, the Bureau of Fisheries completed the construction of the fish ladder, but the National Park Service didn't necessarily approve its construction. It wasn't an explicit approval. And so the fish ladder has sort of been controversial ever since it was put into place. And so the Bureau of Fisheries counted the number of fish that were running up the Brooks River, both before and after the fish ladder was constructed. It seemed like the number of fish that successfully made it upriver was actually fewer after the fish ladder was put into place. Really? And then the fish ladder was, we've got another float plane. All right, we can pause once more. Again, looking out at the nice view of a couple of bears out there by the beach. So yeah, the fish ladder was more properly filled in about 2 years ago. So the Park Service filled in the ladder with rocks and dirt, partly because it seemed like the fish ladder was starting to disintegrate. It was kind of maybe on the verge of collapse.
Oh,
and
that would not be good.
Exactly. If it did collapse, then it might reroute the flow of Brooks River, potentially bringing water away from Brooks Falls itself.
Okay.
And that would have caused a pretty major change to the natural waterway. It may have also threatened the falls platform and that structure. And that was certainly something that the Park Service wanted to avoid. And so the fish ladder itself was filled in. I guess that kind of answers the how, but not necessarily the why. And I think in order to understand the why of the fish ladder being filled in, we have to look at the mission of the National Park Service, which is to preserve in place natural ecosystem. So we want to, have natural processes still working without interference by humans. And the fish ladder was an artificial structure that affected the migration of salmon. And salmon had been successfully getting up and over Brooks Falls for thousands of years before the fish ladder was put into place, right? And it's the policy of the national park to let these animals that we have the pleasure of watching here continue their natural lives, even if that includes a little bit of struggle. So in the same way that if a bear was injured by another bear or if it suffered some natural illness, the Park Service would not interfere. There was a bear, number 89, who as a cub, he was limping on one foot, and it looked fairly severe, but he was able to overcome that injury. And today he's a bear that we can see fishing out at the falls. And so, bears are resilient creatures, salmon are resilient creatures, and it's our place to make sure that they can continue their natural lives.
And part of that natural life is for some of them maybe to not make it up the falls. And then they add to what the first question was, not just the discarded salmon from the bears, but the salmon who just don't make it up the falls. They're still going to be part of that cycle of life for someone, something around.
Precisely, yeah. There's still a place for them, even if they don't make it over the falls itself.
Excellent.
That's
so
right.
we were trying to determine that one, how did we say that? The poor life of one salmon is the supper of someone else.
Right,
So,
exactly, yeah. I like that.
I think that's all the questions we had for today, Becca.
Good
so
deal.
thanks, and keep sending in your questions. And once again, I'm sorry, but it's time for us to say goodbye
From Katmai.